President-elect Joe Biden has named his chief of staff, and his pick isn't as terrible as it could have been. So let me show you the announcement here from Joe Biden. Ron Klain is Joe Biden's new chief of staff. He says here, Klain's deep, varied experience and capacity to work with people all across the political spectrum is precisely what I need in a White House chief of staff as we confront this moment of crisis and bring our country together again. So I'm going to get a little more into why he was sort of the obvious pick for Joe Biden and why this is not a terrible choice for progressives. Again, based on what we would expect. You can't expect Joe Biden to pick Nina Turner as his chief of staff. It's not going to happen. But in terms of the options available, this was the least worst option. ABC News writing here, Klain is Biden's former chief of staff. This is why he was predicted to be the front runner for this position, who led the Obama administration's response to the Ebola virus. Again, we got a two-parter here, somebody who was Biden's chief of staff and he led the response to the Ebola crisis. It makes sense to put him in right now during this pandemic. He was considered a leading contender, in part because of the urgent need to deal with the coronavirus pandemic, of course. Ron Klain here. And by the way, for any Canadians out there, every time I say Ron Klain, I'm thinking Ron McLean, but no one else but Canadians will get that. But here he tweets out, I've seen so many kind wishes tonight on this website. Thank you, and I'm sorry I can't reply to each of you. I'm honored by the president-elect's confidence and will give my all to lead a talented and diverse team in a Biden-Harris White House. Well, how about that? Al Jazeera writing here, as Biden's chief of staff during the financial crisis a decade ago, Klain helped oversee the implementation of the $787 billion Recovery Act that boosted the U.S. economy. In 2014, he earned praise from public health experts as the government's Ebola response coordinator, as I already said. So this is not a horrible choice, as let me read the other two potential choices here for chief of staff. The Star writes, progressives had expressed concerns that Biden would pick one of his other former chiefs of staff, Steve Ricchetti, who faces skepticism for his work as a lobbyist, or Bruce Reed, who is seen as too much of a moderate to embrace reforms pushed by the party's base. But progressives see Klain as open to working with them on top priorities like climate change and healthcare. So Steve Ricchetti, who I believe, it just says lobbyist here, I meant to look this up beforehand, but let's do it right now. Lobbyist, I believe, for health insurance companies. Just double checking that right now. Yes, healthcare lobbyist. So Steve Ricchetti, I think, would have been clearly the worst choice, especially anybody that wants to really improve the healthcare system and maybe move towards Medicare for all like every other goddamn country. But so thank God, avoided Steve Ricchetti or Bruce Reed, who is seen as too much of a moderate. But again, as I told you, Klain being the least worst choice. Waleed Shahid here works with Justice Democrats. He tweeted out, Ron Klain understands the Democratic Party has moved in a more progressive direction and that voters expect bold action. Best of luck to Ronald Klain as he manages the team to act on the biggest crisis of our lifetime. Progressives will keep pushing. So Waleed Shahid here references a New York Times article. This is a quote directly from Ron Klain. If you take what the left side of that debate was, and the more moderate side of that debate, both positions, the whole range of positions, are significantly more progressive than where we were just 7 or 8 years ago, said Ron Klain, former VP, chief of staff, and yeah. So here's somebody who recognizes that the conversation in the Democratic Party, in the base, has moved to the left. Now, I guess you could take this comment one of two ways. You could take it as him saying, well, since the conversation within the Democratic Party has moved left, that means that the moderate position is good enough. Or you could take it in just in the other term, or in the other way of just him recognizing reality and where the discussion actually is and being open to hearing all sides of that discussion in the Democratic Party. Also, though, AOC giving her a thumbs up to this, saying good news and an encouraging choice. Also, keep in mind here that AOC wants to be able to keep lines of communication open with the White House as well. So her right now being a public advocate for some of these decisions helps her ability, potentially behind the scenes, to have discussions with the White House more closely. But again, I know the other voice in my head says they're just playing her and they're never going to capitulate, which, yes, that also, of course, is always going to be an issue. But this is why it doesn't just take individuals to push the administration in a direction that is more for the working class, but it takes a mass movement of people. It takes whether it's a general strike, whether it's a march on Washington, whatever it is, it takes people power to really push the conversation in a direction where the administration feels it's necessary to have to respond. One last thing here, though, because it can't be all good news. Li Feng here tweeting out, Ron Klain, who will serve as Biden's new White House chief of staff, was appointed in 2016 to the Executive Council of TechNet, the trade group that lobbies for Silicon Valley's interests in D.C. So, I mean, we're talking about something that is almost impossible to get away from, that whoever Biden picks in this role is going to be somebody who is well connected to the Democratic Party, well connected to status quo politics. So really, I mean, I guess you had the choice here between a healthcare lobbyist, an extreme conservative, or a Silicon Valley lobbyist. I would pick the Silicon Valley lobbyist over the healthcare lobbyist. But this also isn't his, this isn't mostly what Ron Klain has been doing. Ron Klain has also worked, I'm not sure if I read this earlier, but has worked with Al Gore, was Al Gore's chief of staff as well. Probably the most progressive person Ron Klain has worked with. So he's been in the position where he's heard, or he's been more open to varying ideas, be it far left, be it more conservative. But he is somebody here who, out of all the choices available, the least worst choice. So I like to see that we are moving in a more potentially open direction with at least having these discussions within the White House. But of course, the real test comes when Biden picks the rest of his cabinet that I don't expect will be as favorable as this choice was.